All right, we're here at the Focus, and we have director Phyllis Ellis, who has a documentary at Hot Docs, which is, well, it's opening night tonight, and it's running in Toronto this whole weekend, and next week, of course. And her documentary is called Toxic Beauty.
Hmm.
But before we get into the actual film itself, um, let's discuss and how you submitted the film to Hot Docs and the story of how they called you up and or emailed you and said, "Yeah, this film is going to be in the Hot Docs program."
Well, that's basically how it happened. Finish a film on time. You know when the deadline is, and you submit it. They usually have three different deadlines, and so we submitted the film. White Pine Pictures is the executive producing company, and not long thereafter, and within enough time for them to have seen it, they got in touch and said that we were accepted to the festival, and then not too long after found out that we were one of the big idea films, which was pretty extraordinary, and it was amazing for all the team, like everybody
Hmm.
that was involved.
Um, so speaking to that, when it's like that sort of a big idea, does that mean is it more work for the team, or is it rather something else?
Well, I think we all think our films are pretty big ideas. No, I think it finishes the same way. It just gives the film particular profile. Was telling you earlier, we were at the press conference for Hot Docs, and it's such an honor to be included in the festival and among all these amazing filmmakers and great films. And then they announced the five big ideas, and it was Ai Weiwei, and we were all going to go, how do you fit in with Ai Weiwei? And my friend Martha Kehoe's film, the Gordon Lightfoot film, and there's so many fantastic films at the festival, and it's amazing that hometown, so friends and family, and everybody that supported the film can come. So it's very special.
So let's take a look at your trailer,
Okay.
and Jeff's going to pull that up for
Okay.
us.
This is something controversial. I'm calling out the entire makeup industry. These companies are telling you, yeah, it's gentle, it's safe. And then 10 years down the line, oh my God, I'm infertile. Oh my God, I have cancer.
This cosmetics issue is even bigger than the tobacco industry because we're talking about thousands of different chemicals.
The same chemicals being dumped and running through the rivers are running through our blood.
Skincare, hair, feminine care products have been associated with reproductive problems. Ovarian cancer, preterm birth, mercury poisoning, endocrine disruption.
The cosmetics industry comes back with their own science, and they say, oh, just a little bit of a cancer-causing chemical.
You have no way of knowing what's in your product.
Wealthy, big corporations don't allow regulations to happen. Who allow
Is her name
people to
Mimi
be harmed.
Nguyen or Mima?
Mimi,
Mimi
yeah.
Nguyen. Okay.
Person versus a humongous
Name is
pharmaceutical
Dina?
company.
Dean.
Dina.
Just
to
Dean.
Okay.
I hope that with this self-experiment that I'm doing, it'll catch people's attention.
So you have higher levels than most Americans in at least 3 of your samples here.
Chemicals are not like people. They're not innocent until they're proven guilty.
Unless we do bring these chemicals under better control, we are certainly headed for disaster.
We don't want to wait 60 years to find out that some chemical we use in hand lotion is causing breast cancer.
I'm excited for you.
Yeah, I think I should take my lipstick off. I don't know. Yeah, no, it's amazing, and it was a really it wasn't an easy film to make, and we had some incredible people, really talented people working on it, and incredible champions in the film. So it's pretty nice to end it or start the life of the film after we finish it with
Right.
with a world premiere at Hot Docs.
Right.
It's fantastic.
So, what came first, the actual issue, or was it actually somebody, the actual, was it a subject such as like Mimi or Dean, who are in the film and who have ovarian cancer, or like experience in ovarian cancers?
With Dean, yeah. Well, I mean, Dean had ovarian cancer and took on one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, kind of alone, with the support of Alan Smith, her lawyer, and Dr. Kramer. So that was all happening before we even conceived the film. And so White Pine had this really a great show in development with a young woman by the name of Sarah J. And Peter Raymond, who's the executive producer of the film. They were trying to figure out if there was a feature, if there was a possibility for a feature. And so he asked me to take a look at the subject matter, and I looked at it, and I started to do research with a really great friend of mine and an extraordinary researcher, Karen Doherty. And we were poking around, and we found talc, and then I was an Olympian, and I used talc a lot for a number of years. And I got concerned, and then I got in touch with Dr. Dan Kramer, who's in the film, and we got talking, and was I at risk, and I could possibly be, and then I got scared, and I, kind of came to, if one of the most trusted brands in the world is causally linked to ovarian cancer, what else are we using that could potentially cause us harm, which was kind of the thesis of the film when we started. Yeah. And then you reach out to all of these extraordinary people, and then you have the film.
Nice. Was Dr. Kramer difficult to get an interview with, or to share his knowledge of what, his past experiments and such?
No, no, he wasn't difficult. He is brilliant and busy. But he was really accessible, very interested in a conversation. And it always takes a while, a film, a documentary, who is this person? It takes a while. And what we had when we first pitched the film to Jordana Ross at the Doc Channel, CBC Doc Channel, we had what they call development money. So we had some dough to go and poke around and see if we really had a film. Right. And Dr. Kramer was part of that development process. So by the time we were actually had the dough to make the film, he was kind of a new friend of mine. So yeah, no, yeah. He's a pretty cool guy.
Nice. And how did Mimi Nguyen come on board? She's pretty much your main subject.
Yeah, she's awesome. So I met Dr. Shruti Malhangaya, who's in the film, and she's like the trifecta of everything. She's a surgeon and a reproductive endocrinologist and a fertility specialist. And I got in touch with her through contacts, and unbeknownst to me, Dan Kramer was one of her mentors, which we didn't even know the connection when we first started hanging out and getting to know each other for the film. And she has this program called the Ovulation and Menstruation, like a research study. And she had master students that were helping her, and she invited me into a meeting, and they were doing this section on cosmetics, and Mimi was one of the master students in the meeting. And then she starts talking about, oh my God, I used 27 of these products, and she's a master student starting medical school who wears more makeup than Kim Kardashian, and it just the marriage of that, and then her interest in doing a chemical body burden and a detox, and you saw what she did in the film, so we just followed her along that path.
Nice. What were some of the challenging aspects of doing this film? Was it the actual sequencing of the film, and who to fit in and where?
Yeah, there were so many amazing, brilliant scientists and doctors and champions of this that actually I couldn't fit into the film, not because they weren't extraordinary. It was just, you have to at some point be fairly judicious. Yeah, that was one thing. But we had James Yates who edited this cut of the film. He He's a bit of a maestro, so we worked together on the narrative. But we knew that we have Mel Linka, who's the woman that passes away toward the end of the film. And so she's 60, and she had a lifetime use of a personal care product. And Mimi's whole concern is, I'm 24, and I'm going to be delaying having kids, and I don't know over 20 years what could potentially happen or what would happen if I use these products. And so you have a woman that used a lifetime use that ended, and her life ended by ovarian cancer linked to her use of talc, and then Mimi starting off at the beginning of her career. So we knew we had those two lines. And the other, I think the most difficult was there are so many other stories.
Right.
And these amazing brains are all over the world, all over the United States and Canada, so to get to everyone. So, you just had to kind of, wherever production would pay for me to go, I went,
I know for a fact that documentary filmmakers, when they make a documentary, going into the archives is one of their, great experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So you went to the archives and finding some commercial footage of
Yeah.
Johnson & Johnson and them using a jingle, Johnson & Johnson, and how that's, back in the day was using a jingle was such a prominent way of doing advertising.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you think of their past advertisements of Johnson & Johnson, and when you found that footage and you including that in the film? Of
Right.
course?
I mean, we had a couple of really amazing archivists also working on the film, but I remember a lot of those. I'm, of that age, and so I remember those jingles. I could, almost repeat them without, how you do that with
Yeah.
old commercials. It's also, they're so sexist, and they're objectifying women, and the inference about scent discrimination, and how you're not going to get a good job if you don't smell right, or you'll have a better life, or you'll meet the right man, or all of those sort of advertising knives that they throw at us. But when you look, I think today at advertising, it's the same kind of messaging. It might be a little more sophisticated, but it's still the same messaging.
So in terms of advertising, so what do you think of? I believe the cosmetic industry is doing so well because of, social media and
Mm-hmm.
such. What are your thoughts on that? I know you didn't include that in the film, but what are your thoughts on the correlation or the relation of those two?
So do you mean the ability and the accessibility of social media, how you get messages to people?
Yes.
Or selling products?
Selling products to people through like an Instagram or a Facebook.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just 5 more avenues that many companies and many brands are using to hawk a million different products. I think because the younger people and obviously people my own age too, that's how we're getting our information. And when that's how we're getting our information, it's coming up more regularly than, say, turning a page in a fashion magazine, although fashion magazines are still popular, but now it's just so accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that they say purchasing, I think it was Julie Gelfand and Rick Smith, a couple of the people in our film, were talking about, the internet is like the Wild West. Like if you think things aren't regulated, what you're buying in a major department store or a drugstore, if they're not regulated or those regulations are not being implemented, you and I right now could make a product. We could put whatever we wanted in it, package it really nicely, and put it on the internet right now, and people would purchase it. So and there's no way of regulating what's what's in what is in those products.
So is that do you feel that's a form of capitalism then?
The whole internet thing?
No, not sorry. Yes, the whole internet thing, and then plus, alongside with the fact that the cosmetic industry is a form of capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, there's at the end of the film, there's this congresswoman, and she says corporate greed is a cause of cancer. And I think, to isolate a particular industry. I mean, the cosmetic and personal care industry is massive. I mean, I think Janet Noodleman says in the film, $84 billion industry. It's huge, and it's discretionary. I mean, we don't really need, other than possibly soap and something. We don't need a lot of those products. They're discretionary, and we use them because we're told we should. We're not young enough. We're not tall enough. Our skin isn't soft enough. We don't smell good enough, and all of those things to enhance our lives. I mean, I think if we look at capitalism as a whole, I think industry is a big representation of it.
I'll tell you a little story. I used to work at a media place. I'm not going to say the name, of course.
Right.
So I used to do inside sales. So the first couple weeks, my bosses would say, "Well, okay," because we had a screen in Times Square.
Right.
So my bosses would say, "You're gonna go home tonight, and you're gonna get me 10 leads of all the cosmetic companies that you can think of. And you're gonna write down the address. You're gonna write down all the products they do.
Right.
And you're gonna write down 3 leads and who's the CEO." Who's the brand manager, and who's not the CFO or a chief marketing officer.
Right.
So you would have to go and find all those names and the numbers, and it was a grind. So they had this thing on the web called Red Books, which would give you some sort of links to who is who in the industry, and then it either would give you the phone number or not, or just and my boss would say you need to have like 3 or 4 numbers. I don't want one number on your lead at all. And when I got to call in one of these people by chance, and it was just a by chance sort of job, that when they would answer the phone, they were very, they were not the nicest people at all. They were they seemed very miserable. And they didn't care who was trying to phone them.
Mm-hmm.
They probably thought that it was probably just another sales call, of course. But like they had no welcoming voice at all, and they would just say, "No, like who the fuck is this? I don't know who you are." And then they would like hang up the phone. If I would say, "Well, I'm Fernando from," they would just, and that's it. And from that point on, I would always say that is, I guess these people are just money hungry, and they're in it for the money, and this is the buildup of capitalism and within companies like L'Oreal and whatnot. And yeah, that's my story. And it was just I found it to be really humbling. It's a humbling experience and a very learning experience of what corporate greed is really like. And
I mean, I think everybody wants to make money, and I think that when it comes down to it, based on the Dr. Michaels or Dr. Mizoda in the film, it's if you have free reign and you're not regulated and you're saying everything's okay, if it isn't okay, that's a problem. So I think if the industry gets regulated, and we know what's in the products that we're purchasing, and we know that they're safe, then they can sell as much, eyeshadow as they want. It's just what is safe and what isn't. And I think, the talc issues kind of right up front and center right now, because sometimes it takes that long to develop a disease or something from a carcinogen.
And to develop the appropriate test to actually see if, like...
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, on the other hand, Dr. Kramer, his first study was in 1982. Dr. Bruce Semple from Johnson & Johnson got a hold of him. Dr. Kramer said it says it in the film, he spent a long time trying to convince him that they should possibly put a warning label on it. They disagreed. Well, that was a long time ago. Think about how many years ago that was, 1982. Had they put a warning label on it, had they, done something about it, then how many lives would have been saved? And, a lot of people say, "Are you sure? Is it really?" what we learned from, again, like Dr. Roberta Ness, it's not. What if it does? And in epidemiology, it's the precautionary principle. We have a right to know what is known.
Yeah.
And we know what is known.
Right.
Scott Faber says at the end of the film, there's 2,000 products that contain talc, cosmetics and personal care products. 1,000 of them are loose powders. So it's not just baby powder. Like Kramer says, talc is talc.
Yeah.
And I think it's time that, we listen and we do something about it.
You included the company Detox Beauty, and you have a scene where they're in the store. What are your thoughts on the future of stores like Detox Beauty and a cosmetics that doesn't include like
carcinogens or toxic chemicals or minerals that are carcinogenic? Well, the Detox Market's a pretty cool store because you go in and you've got a lot of different brands that are are identified as sort of clean beauty products. I think there's a huge trend from what I could tell from, again, the people that I met. And I do think that large brands are also very aware of the importance of clean and non-toxic products, because that's what's happening. And, if they don't start to reformulate and kind of get on the program, then people are... Yeah. I mean, I think there'll be a percentage of people that continue to buy. Just, it's like so many people in the film say, it's like the tobacco issue.
Right.
It's different because, when people found out that smoking causes cancer, people, you choose to smoke. But it's obviously, if you're hauling on a cigarette, you pretty much know that there's, it's not awesome. But when you're using, soap or toothpaste or shampoo or dry shampoo or deodorant, those are things that you don't even remotely imagine could be linked or have anything in it that could potentially cause you harm.
What were some of the challenges you had in doing this film?
I think when we started, it was really making sure that everything was true and right, and double checking and double triple checking and making sure that everything was annotated, and access to great people, great scientists, great doctors, great subjects, and allowing people time to get to know myself, Ira Singh, who's the cinematographer, and the rest of our crew, so that they trust us being in their space. I mean, it's quite a privilege to spend time with women that are at the end of their life, and to actually say, it's okay, come on into my world. And then, 3 or 4 weeks later, Mel passes. And Jacqueline Fox, whose audio deposition is in the film, her son was, there was a congressional hearing, and he was one of the witnesses about a month ago. And they were talking to him about her litigation, and he was saying, I didn't know my mom was going to litigate, but she did it because she wanted to help other women so they wouldn't have to go through what she went through. But after she passed away, I had to continue with it because I wanted Johnson & Johnson to know her name. And that's how we all felt in the film. We're naming it. There's women attached to it. And, it's a pretty direct line between the use of something and let's say, ovarian cancer.
Mm-hmm. So I've noticed lately with a lot of documentaries that they're including Rachel Carson and Silent Spring, which I read when I was in university. Do you know as to why people, or not people, but just filmmakers in general, or that they're starting to pay attention to what she has said back in the 1960s, which is, I don't know, to me it's kind of odd, but maybe you can shed light to me why it shouldn't be odd.
Well, there were a couple reasons. One, she's a big hero of mine, and I'm not that far off in age, so I grew up thinking she was a pretty extraordinary woman that stood up and took this on, was not the norm at the time to stand up and fight and do what she did with DDT. But also Silent Spring was the institute in Boston where we had a great opportunity to speak with the senior scientist, Julie Brody, Dr. Julie Brody, and then Robin Dodson, and then their Detox Me program, which they've initiated in the United States, and that's where Mimi went to actually do her detox. So my interest in what Rachel Carson said, we don't know when we're exposed to these chemicals over a number of years. We don't know what's going to happen to our children. And that's the same premise with any toxic chemicals or carcinogens or toxicants that we're exposed to. So it just seems so relevant to me as a woman filmmaker, speaking with women. And she's just a bit of a hero of mine. But I did notice there were a couple of other films that were, where she was included. And because I saw that at the press conference, I thought, wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I think it's great, and I think this is a great time for her to establish what she has said. And I think a lot of people are actually paying attention, which is a good thing. When I was reading what she was saying in Silent Spring, I don't think it resonated with a lot of people at the time, but now it's starting to resonate, which is a good thing. I think it's finally, she's finally done her work, so to speak.
Well, and also what impact did DDT have on the environment?
Yeah.
How did DDT connect to, say, climate change? And and I remember Dr. Michaels and I were talking about that, and he was saying, we were talking about Rachel Carson, and he was saying, remember when you move forward in this film, like when you move forward, there aren't always two sides to every story. The media is always trying to, and he cited climate change, and he said, in the 70s and early 80s, there were two sides. Is it a hoax, or is climate change real? Well, if we hadn't had that debate for as many years as we did, maybe the polar ice caps wouldn't be falling apart.
Yeah.
So he just strongly advised that, when you question real science and science over time and, case-controlled studies, when you challenge it or when you question it, it sort of degrades all science. And I think that's what happened to, even though Rachel Carson made such a huge impact, and especially with breast cancer too, because she was, diagnosed with breast cancer while she was, sort of at the end there. For me, she's a hero, and her words emulated and resonated with me as far as the chemicals and the products that we're using.
So do you see the cosmetic industry as like pesticide, sort of along those lines? Because,
well, I think it's a great question, and Dr. Rick Smith says in the film, we spend a lot of time with this exterior pollution crisis, and that's really important, but we're not really looking at the second pollution crisis, which is happening inside of us. So in that way, when we're spraying something on a bush to kill beetles or whatever it is, when we're spraying something on ourselves, what are the potential dangers that are associated with that? And like Rachel Carson says, we simply don't know. And in some cases we do know, and I think that's what, the film is sort of an overview of that.
Talk a little bit about White Pine Productions, and I actually interviewed Peter Raymond at the Hot Docs press conference. He's also the producer of this film as well. Am I correct?
Yes, yeah. He executive produced the film, and the company produced the film. Barry Cohen is an independent producer and filmmaker, and she was the producer on the film. Steve Panizia and Andrew Munger, supervising producer, and they make all kinds of different television and features. Peter's great love, of course, is documentary filmmaking, and has been sort of Peter, kind of a grandfather of doc films in Canada. He also executive produced another film at the festival called Corporate Coup d'etat, which I think is its North American premiere. I think is on Monday night. We're Sunday night, and they're Monday night. So I think it's I think White Pine. This is their 40th birthday.
Nice.
This year, so I think it's a nice birthday present for Peter to have 2 films at Hometown Festival. That's one of the sort of the toniest documentary festivals in the world. So it's pretty great.
What do you want your audience to take away from the film when they watch Toxic Beauty?
Well, there's a couple of things. It's also a really good question, because I always feel like films are like going to a gallery. You take away, whatever you relate to yourself, a little bit of, you or someone you know. So I think it's a subjective experience in a lot of ways. I think we should read labels. I think we have the power to affect change. Politicians work for us, and Health Canada put a warning out about talc, I think December 5th, 2018. Talc is banned from cosmetics and personal care in the EU. I think we should ban talc in Canada. I can go right now to Shoppers Drug Mart and buy a bottle of J&J baby powder with talc right now.
Yeah.
So I think be careful and cautious, and I think awareness is really important, and that there are alternatives. So, if you're using something and you see chemicals that are introduced in the film, there are a ton of products that you can purchase that don't have that. And I think the industry is, certainly moving toward a cleaner product.
There was an article in She Does the City, if I'm not mistaken, and she was asking you in regards to the impact that this film would have on the cosmetic industry.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate a little bit more, or tell us a little bit what your answer to that is, and how you feel about the impact of this film on the actual cosmetic industry?
Well, I think that the champions in the film that have been working in this space for a long longer than I have, in their own sort of individual research labs, or in their in their sort of advocacy world. I think that the unique thing about this particular film is that a lot of them are in one place at one time. So I think there's a powerful message in that. I think that I don't think that the cosmetic industry, this is new information. I think this is something that they've been trying to figure out. I think it costs a lot of money to reformulate products.
Their products, yeah.
And I think that they're all trying to figure out, okay, we have to make a change. So I think that it's all these amazing people in one place. There's victims and survivors and women who have lost their lives. There's, a young woman that's sort of taking us on a journey and an immediate response to the use of products. So I think it's part of a big conversation that's been happening for a long time, and sometimes things are just hit at the right time.
Right.
I think this conversation is just kind of hitting at the right time.
Right. And I think that will hit at the right time. And Phyllis Ellis, thank you so much for being on our podcast, and good luck with your film at Hot Docs.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay. How was that?
That was great.
Oh, good.